Prepare to shed a tear. It is our final multi-game slate for NFL this year. I'm in mourning already, but we do go out on a fun note, at least, with the conference championships. It is the Commanders and the Eagles. It is the Bills and the Chiefs. We're going to break things down from a DFS perspective, letting you know our top picks of this week on FanDuel for the 2-game slate across each position. Welcome on in to the Heat Check. That's right here on FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Thursday by Brandon Gdula. You can check him out on X at Gdula13. He's on Blue Sky at Gdula. Check out his work at FanDuel Research, where he is a senior managing editor. Brandon, final multi-game slate of the year. How are we doing today?
Good. We're going to dig into the splits and everything. We'll talk a lot of game theory, but have a little more breathing. I mean, we're going to be efficient. We're not going to just mess around, but have a little more wiggle room than we typically do. Definitely not like a 13-game slate, not even like a 6-game slate or 3 games. I don't know. It's 2 games. They're intriguing for different reasons, I'd say. So at least we got that going for us. But it feels a little freeing, but also a little bittersweet.
A little bittersweet for sure. We're going to go out hopefully on a high note, though, because I do think there are some interesting plays across this 2-game slate. Hopefully we can identify some winners for you guys to send you out to the offseason minus the Super Bowl single-game slate on a high note. Speaking of that Super Bowl single-game slate, we will have a preview of that the Thursday, I assume, before Super Bowl 59. We'll talk about that from a single-game perspective, letting you know our top plays there. That'll be on the YouTube page, but also on the FanDuel Research podcast feed. Also on the FanDuel Research podcast feed, PGA show back, and I think better than ever. Every Tuesday, breaking down that week's PGA Tour event, talking best bets and DFS picks. That is on the FanDuel Research podcast feed, wherever you get your podcast. So go there, hit subscribe, and make sure if you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating and review as well. Of course, NFL shows do stream live on the YouTube page, along with covering the spread. Just talk to Megan Payton to get her best bets for the conference championships 5 minutes ago. And tomorrow, Aiden Cotter will join me to break down his top player props for the conference championships as well. Go to the YouTube page, turn on notifications there, and leave us a thumbs up. We appreciate everyone doing so as always. In the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel takes the NFL playoffs to the next level, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's $300 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Plus, when you win, you'll get paid instantly and get started with $300 in bonus bets. Make this playoff season unforgettable. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, an affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat Connecticut. Visit MD Gambling Help in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's kick things off here by talking about the Commanders at the Eagles. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook. Eagles favored by 6.5, and the total in this game sits at 47.5. Key injuries to know here is that Jalen Hurts was limited Wednesday due to the knee injury he suffered in the divisional round. Dallas Goedert didn't practice due to an ankle injury, nor did Cam Jurgens. He had a back injury. I think they'll all play, but worth monitoring there. As for the Commanders, no Sam Cosmi here. He will miss the remainder of the year after he tore his ACL against the Lions. Big loss there for the Commanders. And then defensive tackle Daron Payne and linebacker Bobby Wagner didn't practice either. No snow for this weekend. Shed a tear for that too. 11-mile-per-hour winds, 39 degrees, no precipitation, so better weather than last weekend. Still a bit of wind, but not enough where I'm super, super concerned here. So Brandon, Eagles pretty big favorites. Offense looked disjointed at times in their 2 postseason wins. Hasn't mattered because the defense has played relatively well and they've done enough offensively to get the job done. What's your top-down view here of Commanders at Eagles?
I'm just glad for A.J. Brown that he's not playing in the snow. He said he wouldn't wish that on his worst enemy, which I know conditions weren't great, but like they weren't that bad, I guess. But maybe that's just because like I'm from the Northeast, not the Midwest.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania is not the Midwest, so just let's get that out of the
Your
way.
half is. Yeah.
No, it is not. Did you mention Quinion Mitchell? He was limited.
He was limited too. Yeah, with his shoulder. It sounds like he's okay, but yeah, I should have listed him too.
Just was making sure I wasn't overlooking anything there. But yeah, I think top down, this is the less appealing of the two games. It's not just the spread, and this one has a little bit more potential, despite the outburst from Washington last week, has a little bit more potential to be extra sloggy, if that's a word.
Sure.
Just because Philly's been so run heavy. They want to keep the ball on the ground. And they're able to do that. So I think that this one sort of top down is a matter of how much, not pushback, because I think that's not really an issue even with the spread here. It's not so much pushback. It's how many plays can the Commanders get, and then how much can Jaden do, in some conditions here against their really good overall defense. So that's kind of what I think I need to figure out. I'm going to prevent myself from launching into sort of game theory takes here from a building block standpoint. But what's your sort of top down view of this one? What's your model thinking for this game?
Yeah, I took the Commanders money line, took them plus 6.5. Well, I took 6 once it got there, and then it went 6.5. So good job, Jim, by not getting the full half point there, you moron. I did take the over too. I have the other total slightly higher, so I agree with you where this game is less appealing because of the 4 defenses, Eagles, I think pretty easily the best defense on this slate. And yeah, the Commanders have done well against that. But, we talk about on the show how repeat divisional matchups, efficiency declines. And they've seen each other twice now. Now, granted, in that repeat matchup, they turned the ball over 5 times. The Commanders did and still put up, I think, like 39 points. So they were able to overcome that. And that was when the Eagles were playing really good ball. And also now known to Kobe Dean, we saw the Rams ground game actually get the ball moving pretty well last week. So I agree with you. The other game is more appealing from like a top-down perspective. I do think that the Commanders will do something here, though, and I think that they'll be able to be competitive and keep this game close enough. I think the question is, does that matter? Because the appeal in a close game is, okay, we force both teams to keep their foot on the gas for all 4 quarters. We force kind of this chaotic script and stuff like that. Like, that would be appealing for the pass catchers in Philadelphia, but, like, they don't throw in a neutral script. They just pound the rock. So we both, I think, expect this game to be at least somewhat competitive. But like, does that put you on the Eagles pass catchers? Because we're pretty desperate for good pass catchers on this slate. I would love to be ecstatic about AJ Brown or Devontae Smith, but they just don't want to throw. When they have thrown, it hasn't been amazing recently either.
Yeah, like that's the kind of, we're going to talk about making assumptions with each and every lineup. That gets, that's important. That's something that we talk about a lot on bigger slates as you're rounding out your lineups or kind of just starting from scratch, honestly. You really got to ask yourself like how you think the game's going to go from a baseline standpoint, and then you can pivot off of that. But, the hard part here is with AJ Brown, the salary is like it's so hard because it's not too high for his market shares, but it's too high for the volume. Like his target shares have been honestly absurd. And Dallas Goedert not 100%. There's a chance that there's even more volume here. But if you look at games with Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert healthy, which is not a very big sample, it's basically 5 games that I want to look at. Here are AJ Brown's single game target shares: 34.5%, 35%, 32%, 17%, and 35%. So 4 out of those 5 games, he had at least a 32% target share. The things we would do on a full slate for a 32% sort of baseline target share, crazy. For a talent like AJ Brown, crazy. But you look at these target totals and they're just not where you need them to be, and it's bogging down the production, the efficiency from Jalen Hurts, not specifically ideal. And you look at kind of that game at Washington, like, yeah, you might want to look back and say, we had 15 targets, 8 catches, 97 yards, and a touchdown. That was the Kenny Pickett game. So do I want to actively get heavy on the Eagles receivers from a baseline standpoint? No. But when we talk game theory, a big game from A.J. Brown is in the cards.
Yeah.
I still prefer, Saquon Barkley. I still prefer probably just double stacking like Jalen Hurts and Saquon and saying there's not a whole lot of passing here and kind of going that route. But A.J. Brown's really fascinating. So where are you with him specifically? Because we like Devontae Smith plenty, but A.J. Brown is a little bit different. So where are you with Brown? Let's start there.
Yeah, so you look at single game target shares. I look at overall target shares. Same 5-game sample, 31% for A.J. Brown, 7 targets per game. The salary has come down. It's 82, and like that helps versus when he was like 88, 85, somewhere in there. It has come down, which does help, but like, I don't know. And I think that like the other part of this discussion here is that Terry McLaurin 79, and like McLaurin's matchup is frightening. And they shut him down both those games. So that's scary for sure. So if we're comparing him to McLaurin, I might lean Brown there, but that's more about skepticism around McLaurin and his matchup than it is, being super excited about A.J. Brown. If we're talking about we'd rather pay for A.J. Brown or have more flexibility to get to, Josh Allen, to get to Saquon Barkley with James Cook, I'm picking the running back, Saquon Barkley, James Cook over A.J. Brown in terms of priorities every single time. Now, that does not mean every lineup, because like you said, we can make assumptions, but like, it's so hard to feel jazzed. It's just like, it's so muted. The efficiency hasn't been there, like you said. I think that Hurts in that 5-game sample with everyone healthy is at 0.09 net expected points per dropback, which is NumberFire's EPA metric. League averages are on like 0.1. So he's been actually a bit below average compared to league average in that time. Now, small sample. We don't know what the matchups were in that span either. So factors working against him, but it's not great. You mentioned Devontae Smith, going back to that 5-game sample. His 22% target share translates to 5 targets per game, including 0.8 deep targets per game, which is, again, for me, 16 plus yards downfield. So I wish I could get jazzed. It's just like so tough when the volume is so low. And I'd expect it to be low once again, because when you have Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts, why would the volume not be low when you can instead pound in the teeth of the opposing team with those two guys?
Yeah. Red zone shares also kind of dispersed from a target standpoint. We know they're run heavy in the red zone too. It's like I cite target per route rate pretty often. Maybe anyone's joined in the postseason, but I'll just kind of throw these out there again as sort of benchmarks. Sort of average is around 20%, elites around 30%. So how often on your routes you're actually getting targeted? This won't sort of forgive the low volume itself, but even from this standpoint, if you look at games with Goddard, Brown, and Smith active, Devontae Smith's at a 19.8% share. He's like kind of league average in that metric. AJ Brown's at 27.3%. So not quite elite, but closer. And we see Dallas Goedert with not as good a target share, 22 versus 20.5%, but it's close-ish. But on a per route basis, Goddard's at 24%. I know he's banged up, but honestly, you don't necessarily react just to what we saw last week. But both of those 2-game slates last week had double tight end perfect lineups, and so you get a little more receptive to saving salary whenever maybe 40 yards and a touchdown is plenty at a salary like this. So I'm not going to say like so far. I need to see where Goddard ends up health wise here, but Goddard's probably my secondary preference over Devontae Smith. I still think Smith has pretty high single game upside, but when you factor in opportunity cost and salary, I think I'd go Brown and then Goddard on this team.
Yeah. Looking at the just building off what you said about tight end in the flex, like if you look at Goddard at 59 compared to other guys in that range, like he's competitive is what I would say. So like, yeah, you could definitely make that case again for a tight end there. I think as far as Smith versus Goddard, I would like to get to Travis Kelce. I think that's going to play a role in that. And Devontae Smith is kind of like in a dead zone at receiver. So I feel like I'll probably wind up preferring Devontae Smith over Dallas Goedert, but I don't think your argument is, I think your argument's fair. I just think that based on other considerations, outside factors, I might wind up leaning towards Devontae Smith.
Yeah, like I don't have that much against Smith. Again, it's the volume, but the target shares are there. You don't really expect that. Let's say Washington plays from ahead, and Philadelphia has to throw. Is there really a 3-man, target tree here? Like that's not the concern. It's more I am expecting Philadelphia to move the ball or keep the ball on the ground, even if they're just kind of moving it okay and not putting everything on Jalen Hurts, who also got rolled up. Like I think he's fine, but they probably don't necessarily want to have him dropping back more than they need to.
Right.
And especially whenever you can ride right now the best running back in football. So
yeah,
I just kind of think that the target volume is not going to be enough for Smith to give him enough chances. Again, as a baseline, this is the hard part of talking about a 2-game slate. Like,
right.
It's not that Devontae Smith. Yeah, like basically everyone's in play, and there are realities where I go with like a Jalen Hurts. I don't want to say fade Saquon, but just build a lineup without him because I love Saquon. You go Smith, Goddard, Jalen Hurts. You're off to like a pretty different build. Whenever there's only so many ways to build, so I'm okay with Smith, but I still think that there's a better case to be made opportunity cost wise with Goddard, especially who's a pretty good threat in the red zone.
So let's talk about the man you mentioned, Saquon Barkley, salary $9,800 for this week. It should be higher, frankly. Went berserk again last week, 205 yards rushing, 27 receiving. If you look at the games he's played, where I'm looking at a sample that makes him look worse because they really rode him in the 2 games that Hurts was out. But if we make this is the worst case scenario, and it's the games where Jalen Hurts has been fully healthy. In that sample, Saquon is at 144.9 yards from scrimmage per game. Second highest in the slate is James Cook, 84.8. He's almost double the next guy. So I give you 10 lineups. Is Saquon in all 10?
I don't think he can be. I think there's enough of a reality where he goes for I was trying to thin out the scrimmage yards, and the number that came to mind was 150. So that tells you a lot. But he'd get 150 scrimmage yards, but they just insist on having Jalen Hurts score. And there's a chance that without touchdowns, even a crazy high scrimmage yard game might not be enough for Saquon if there's enough performance from other key players. That's going to be what it comes down to. So there are enough realities where Barkley is fine, but not phenomenal and doesn't make the perfect lineup. If you basically have Travis Kelce come to life and you kind of needed salary there, or Devontae Smith has, that 80-yard one touchdown game, 100 yards, something like that. So I'm probably going 8 out of 10. Just to leave myself open to the possibility that Barkley is not going to break the slate open.
I might need more than 10 in order to have one without him, I think.
I'm closer to that, but again, this comes down process-wise. If this were it's hard to say, but if this were a full slate, he would be such a big priority.
Yeah.
But you're talking, I'm thinking tournaments. If you're playing against a couple of your friends or a small sort of cash game format, just don't really overthink it probably with Saquon here. But if you want to get different in a tournament, one of the simplest ways to do it is build a lineup without Saquon and hope that he doesn't go bananas.
I think that part of the reason why I need more is just because So Josh Allen and Saquon Barkley, and Josh Allen is my quarterback 1 on this slate. 59-29 left. I almost said per golfer, but per roster slot from there on out. Like I can get in my James Cook share, and that's a lineup I can make work very easily. I just don't know if I don't use Saquon, where am I spending that salary? So are you like leaving salary on the table in those non-Saquon lineups? What's your thought process there?
Yeah, but that's the thing. Is like everybody's able to roster Saquon relatively easily. I'm just saying, for those of you joining these huge tournaments and wanting to be different, a very simple way to do that is to try a lineup without Saquon. Leaving salary on the table doesn't ever feel good. I'm not saying like that's the primary way to go. I'm just saying that if 85% of lineups in your tournament have Saquon, which is probably not that outrageous of a benchmark here, and he scores 18 points, you have a huge potential advantage. Now you still need other players to do stuff. So where's that salary going? Right. That's the big question. Then you come into like the James Cook. You're probably playing like Brian Robinson, like because running back itself gets so thin. It's not just like the flex plays, but I hope I'm making my point here.
No, what you're saying makes total sense. I just feel
so like if you built 10 tournament lineups, you're just going with Saquon and hoping that you can kind of get a little bit different elsewhere.
Like maybe I'd omit him from 1, but yeah, I think so.
So like that's okay. So that's where I am. I said like 2. I think one way to think about this as well is not necessarily to omit Saquon, but play him with Jalen Hurts,
or play him with like if you like to your point where you're saying 85% of the field has Saquon. What are you doing to deviate from that 85%? Yes. That could be with Hurts. Like that could definitely be the option. I think that would make a lot of sense. I think the other option could be you kind of load up on Commanders if you want to be different, because they're going to have the lowest team total in the slate by a good margin. Yeah. They have the toughest matchup on the slate, also by a pretty good margin. But we also know where the ball is going for the most part. I know McLaurin had tough setups in that game, in his first game with the Eagles, but like it's also Terry McLaurin. I think that Cliff Kingsbury's done to his credit, a pretty good job of finding ways to get McLaurin the ball recently. Ever since Noah Brown went out, like in the games without Noah Brown that Dimey Brown has played, McLaurin's target share is 28% of the 40% deep target share, 28% inside the red zone too. So those money targets you talk about, we know where they're all going. Dimey Brown had 1 last week and Zach Ertz had 1. Like I joking or exaggerating, but like we know where they're going and they're going to McLaurin. So I think the Saquon with a commander stack could be a way to be a bit different without being dumb. And I do think there's appeal in that because, like, again, I think the Commanders keep this game close. I like the over in this game. So there are paths to that. So I think we're in alignment where you've got to find a way to be different. I just want to do it around Saquon. And you do too, because like you said 8 out of 10. That's a lot too. Yeah. I think that I'd rather, with those 2 extra lineups, have Saquon in there and just find different ways to be different within those.
I think another way is Commanders, but in this case, Saquon with AJ Brown. Sure. There's a pretty easy case to be made that Saquon still gets like his 150 and 2, and AJ Brown gets 8 targets and has.
If he has 101, he's in the perfect lineup this week, almost guaranteed.
Yeah. So like that's a way to go about it. Yeah, and that like I haven't built enough lineups, but I can already kind of sense that what the default build is going to be. All the quarterbacks have a pretty high salary. You're not saving that much with Mahomes at 77 to like say this is completely different than a Josh Allen lineup with, at 87 or anything like that. There's kind of 2 standout. You could maybe bet against James Cook, but like Cook has such an easy case to be to the RB2 based on what his upside is in a playoff game. And then you're kind of just tinkering with some value receivers, value as in like mid to low 6K range and below that. And then 1 or 2 tight ends, depending on how many receivers you like. it's a really easy sort of default way to go. And I think that's the best overall case to be made. As you probably play Josh Allen, Saquon, James Cook, get your defense, and then you kind of just are forced into that like default. I think a lot of people are going to kind of naturally build a lineup that way. So
Agreed.
Whenever you're playing a 2-game slate, thinking about the alternatives is really important. But I do think you make a good point of getting heavy on Commanders potentially. Presumably Terry's the first, like second and third place you look, but like what other Commanders are drawing your attention here?
Yeah, I think it's the running backs, both Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler, frankly. Robinson's salary 64, Eckler's salary 56. I think that they are the RB 3 and 4 in the slate by a wide margin over, I guess it'd be versus like Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, Ty Johnson, Ray Davis, Kenneth Gainwell. So it's like, no S word.
Well,
they're 3 and 4.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Last week, we saw Brian Robinson return to more of that featured role. He had a 52% snap rate. He did outsnap Eckler in the wild card game, 51% to 48%. So kind of a 50-50 split there, with Eckler's role scaling back a little bit last week. In the divisional round, it was, again, pretty similar in terms of the first half splits, 54% to 46%, with Robinson more active in the red zone at 48% of the snaps and Eckler at 43%, but still kind of a close split. I think this could still be a matter of game script or just there are kind of teams where I don't know if it's even conscious, but one back just winds up playing more snaps. And I think it could go kind of either way. I'm not convinced that they're like, hey, we want to keep Austin Eckler to like a 40% snap rating, get Robinson 55%. I think it's just kind of whatever at this point.
Yeah.
Do you have a firm read or preference on either of these two backs?
So I like both. My preference is for Eckler due to salary. He's a 56, Robinson 64. If you look at the games they played, where both have been like fully healthy and good to go, Robinson 71.9 yards per game and Eckler's 61.8. So not that far off. Robinson does have the red zone edge, 27% to 14% for Eckler. And we saw that last week too with a couple of red zone touchdowns for Robinson. With Eckler, though, I think this is kind of like a scheme thought, because if you think about the Eagles, really good defensive line with Jalen Carter, all these guys up front, the secondary, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, all those guys playing really good football too, Darius Slay. Their weakest spot with Nakobe Dean being out is linebacker, and the person most likely to torment that would likely be Eckler. So I think that's part of why I lean towards Eckler. And also, like, I think we're talking about be different without being dumb. I don't think we'll see Eckler be super, super popular, given that it was Robinson who was, Eckler was good last week too, but Robinson did score twice. So I think Eckler has a lot of appeal. I like him, I think, more than everybody in the 5,000 range on the slate as a whole. My favorite 5,000 range player, regardless of position. So I'm pretty high on him. How about you, between the distribution between those two guys?
Yeah, it's a matter of what you care about more. Last week or sort of earlier matchups, we did see in that first meeting Eckler get peppered. He had a team high 9 targets, team high 8 catches, 89 yards receiving against the Eagles. Nobody else.
Both those guys in the field together a lot in that game.
Zach Ertz was held. He had 47 yards. He was next up. He did score.
Elevated too.
Yeah. Nobody else had, obligatory Zach Ertz revenge game here, but nobody else had more than 17 yards in that matchup when Jaden Daniels totaled 191 and Eckler had basically half of those yards. I think you make a good case of, there are probably realities where they just kind of keep checking down to Eckler and trying to create space. I think this makes sense both if they are trailing, but also to move the ball in a different way. That may not happen, but we're talking a 2-game slate. You kind of have to be receptive to, I thought they'd use Eckler more and it didn't happen. But if you kind of go with Eckler and say, you know what, Robinson's touchdowns, I don't think they're going to be there this week just due to this being a different game than what they had against the Lions last week. I think that's the type of stuff that, you play Saquon, but maybe play Eckler
Yeah.
in that same lineup. That's people don't necessarily love running back stacks. We're open to that on full
Yeah.
slates. It's obviously way more in play, almost a necessity sometimes on these smaller slates, but I think that definitely tracks. So Eckler, slight edge over Robinson for me.
Yeah.
So does that put Eckler as number 2 for you as far as commander preferences among the flex players?
Well, he's probably 1 over McLaurin, frankly.
Okay.
The Terry was more like the thought process of like, okay, be a bit different, but like just straight up, Eckler's my favorite. The receivers are tough. Downey Brown's been awesome. Like he looked sick against the Lions, really good against the Buccaneers as well. In the games without Noah Brown, that De'Ami Brown has played, 16.5% target share versus 14% for Olamide Zaccheaus. I will note that this is an Olamide Zaccheaus revenge game. All 3 of his touchdowns this year have come in revenge games. Like he's got the Trey Palmer disease where he only does well when he wakes up feeling peed off. PISSED off for the kids. Peed off sounded weird, so I figured I should clarify what I was referring to without getting the explicit tag on Spotify. I still think Brown's the better play, but did want to note that Zaccheaus does freak out in revenge games as a tongue-in-cheek comment more than anything else.
Yeah, I want to make sure that, again, with that default build, we'll talk quarterbacks and rank them and stuff, but if you go with Allen and Saquon and Cook, this is kind of where you're going to be living for, I would say, your third receiver or potentially like the flex. It's really easy to sort of get stuck into that lineup build. And I don't love anyone down here enough to want to make that like, I don't like, you're going to make concessions. I would just take a long look at maybe trying to tweak things where you're not just kind of rotating in these guys who may not really have a pulse. So,
and they're not even my favorites in this range either among receivers.
Yeah. So, and we're talking again, lowest implied team total for the week. That could make them and should make them kind of a little bit of an afterthought. But the one thing we haven't really discussed here is quarterback.
Yep, let's do that now.
If you're playing Jaden, those guys obviously have way more appeal, although Jaden's rushing is potentially enough to sort of stand alone. So where are you with Jaden and Jalen Hurts for this game?
I think in the interest of like mixing it up, Daniels has a lot of appeal because Josh Allen will be the most popular quarterback on this slate. That's definitive. And he should be, frankly. He's the best process-based play. Daniels, though, can make some fun stuff happen. 81 rushing yards against the Eagles in the second matchup. First one was when he was dealing with that rib injury. So I don't want to put a lot of stock in what he did from a rushing perspective there or from a passing perspective. But like we've seen teams sell out to stop Daniels rushing on 3rd and 4th down, the first rounds of the playoffs. And it's worked. Only 36 and 51 rushing yards, but then he's killed them through the air. So if you're Vic Fangio, are you like, well, this guy's shredding teams through the air. Do you let him run a bit more then? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I think there's a scenario where the Eagles say like, okay, this guy's proven he can shred us through the air. He did that to both the Bucks and the Lions. Maybe we play things where we try to let him scramble a bit, but try to prevent the big plays like down the field, which Vic Fangio defenses do a great job of doing. So I think that he has the highest rushing ceiling on this slate. So to me,
yardage wise, yeah,
I think he kind of winds up being is QB too stupid? Like, where is he compared to Hurts for you?
I think he's QB2, mostly because I think Hurts is going to be, he's a mobile quarterback, but he's really not like a rushing quarterback necessarily in the same sense to me. Like,
outside of the 40-yard touchdown last week.
Yes, which he doesn't do super frequently. Right. He has 6 and 7 carries in 2 playoff games. He's just not 100% healthy. And the other thing too is like you don't really get. Yeah, I know he had 290 here as Jim's pulling up his box score for anyone watching. He's like not a dual threat quarterback. Like
he's not going to get you a 300-yard bonus. He's done it once this year.
Like it's just not super common. Can he? Sure. In the right game script, if he connects on a downfield pass or two, sure. Has that been what they've tried to do? Absolutely not. Is he getting? I mean, Jaden had 13 and 16 carries in 2 playoff games. We're kind of, because we have 4 rushing quarterbacks to some degree on the board, you kind of can nitpick like 6.5 carries per game in the playoffs. He's still going to get those goal line rushes, which are basically an automatic 6 points. I think that's not going away so long as he's on the field, even if he's not 100%. We kind of know that. We learned that last week. So to me, if the question is Hurts or Daniels, I'm still going Daniels, despite the fact that he's a road underdog, because I would expect that he runs for more yards, he runs more times, and he has the potential to throw. I mean, he threw for 5 touchdowns against Philly in that wild game. Not necessarily banking on that again, but he's got like the dual threat ability that Josh Allen has and Patrick Mahomes has. I think the bigger question is how far behind. Like, I think we're going to say Josh Allen tier 1.
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels tier 2. Is Hurts in that tier? Is it really close, or is sort of Hurts outside of that tier? And then
I think because of the tush push, he has to be in that tier.
I think so too. On a 2-game slate,
yeah.
His chance for
also
2
just
touchdowns.
A good matchup. It's a good matchup too. That helps.
Washington is pretty good against rushing quarterbacks, but it's something that I just kind of look at and don't put a ton of stock into. So yeah. And again, I don't really view Hurts as like the scrambler, especially with the knee injury. It's more that he's got that Josh Allen vibe of just getting 6 points for his team getting to the 1-yard line. So I think it's close, and I would have them in the same tier, but I would probably go Daniels more often than Hurts personally.
I agree with that as well. Any final thoughts for you on this game?
Like receptive to the Zach Ertz, De'Ami Brown types whenever I'm playing Daniels or kind of need to make it work, but this one's relatively easy to keep tight, I think, which is nice.
Okay, so let's talk about the second game then. That is the Bills at the Chiefs. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, Chiefs are slight favorites. They're money line -126, Bills at +108. Total in this game sits at 47.5. We already talked about how we think this game is the slightly more appealing game. What's your top-down view of this one in addition to that thought?
Excited for it, honestly. Just sort of as a fan, which is super easy and obvious to say, but I'm really curious to see how the Chiefs look whenever they're finally kind of, if a team can get them with their backs up against the wall in a crucial game, this year's version of the Chiefs. I'm just kind of hoping for that. I think this Buffalo team clearly has learned a lot. They've been through a lot, so they're kind of hardened to a lot of things. And I just do see this one playing close, like the spread suggests. I do see this one, again, I dusted off the model for the playoffs. I'm expecting this one to be higher scoring than what we get in the opening game. So I have kind of high hopes for it. And we also have the QB1, which is always nice.
Yes, we do. I agree with you that it should be higher scoring. I took the over in this one as well because I've taken the over in 6 consecutive playoff games. 3-1 last week, so that was good. You were right on the Chiefs and Texans, so you got that. But I do think we'll see some points here. You talked about Josh Allen being QB1. $8,700 is his salary for this one over on FanDuel. Like, do we really need to sell people on Josh Allen? I know that the passing yardage was not there last week, but it didn't have to because they had a lead in that game. He had the rushing. A couple of rushing touchdowns. He has now had multiple rushing scores 4 separate times this year because he's a psychopath. So I don't know. I give you 10 lineups. How many is Allen in?
So this was actually where I was going to go to with the Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts conversation. If you're building 10 lineups, I think having all 4 quarterbacks is a mistake just due to, unless you're literally swapping out and saying, I love these 8 other options, but I want to get the quarterback right. I don't really think that's necessarily the right way to go, but I think if you're playing all 4, over 10 lineups. It's probably wrong, with Mahomes being the easiest one to overlook. But at a certain point, I think you have to ask yourself the question of how many of that QB3 do you want? So for me, I like Allen so much that I'm probably going 6 out of 10.
I thought 5. So yeah, I'm in line with you pretty much.
And then it's a matter of maybe 3 Daniels, 1 Hurts, which I don't even like having just one share of a quarterback.
His target distribution is thin enough though, where you can probably get by with just one on Hurts.
That's true, but Allen also kind of has the inverse problem of spreading it out so much that it's hard to get it right with the best stacking candidates. But again, this team doesn't always have spike weeks with their pass catchers, even whenever Josh Allen has a big game. So I don't care so much about that. And I think the easiest way to sort of differentiate with Allen is not to ignore his pass catchers, but not necessarily feel like you need to load up on them and hope that he does have that huge rushing game. You know, if you rush it like what he did at Detroit, the 362 yards, 2 touchdowns, but if he runs for like 70 yards and 2 scores or something like that, and Keon Coleman gets 1 catch for 8 yards,
it's 1 catch for 64 yards and no touchdowns. I'm pretty sure he had that exact stat line against the Lions.
I think the bigger question here is, are you more likely to go with multiple pass catchers with Josh Allen on a small slate, or like average under 1 where you kind of just don't expect big games and maybe have 1 here and there?
I think I'll average 1.
I think that's a big question.
I think I'll average at least 1 because Khalil Shakir is a 25% target share in their relevant games. Like, he doesn't get downfield work, but like the smaller the slate, the more appealing Khalil Shakir is. Because I don't need 85 yards and 2 touchdowns out of a guy for him to be viable. So I like Shakir enough where I think I'll average at least 1 plus for Josh Allen. I like Keon Coleman enough where I'll average at least 1. Dalton Kincaid is not allowed to have more than 53 yards, but his salary is also low at 52. And like, he has the building blocks to do something. Like poking him with a stick, do something. Or like the Simba meme, wake up. Come on, Dalton, let's do something here. So I'll average more than 1. I think that if I have 5 Allen lineups, I will actively make sure I have 1 that has nobody but James Cook. I'll probably have James Cook in there, but I'll have nobody else in there. I will want to like actively make sure I do that, but I'll average more than 1, I think.
Yeah, I think, again, we're always stacking, but it's a 2-game slate. You got to think about things. There are probably realities where Allen has a solid passing game, but really does it with the rushing. James Cook scores. He might even throw a touchdown to Ty Johnson. And like, the real kind of galaxy brain play was, sure, you have Shakir, but you don't necessarily chase it with a lot of guys who, frankly, like, they just don't have a lot of yardage upside. You talked about a 7-game sample. That's what I pulled with Amari, Keon Coleman, and Dalton Kincaid active. Nobody's averaging over 55 and a half yards per game in that split. Coleman's at 44.7, Kincaid's at 33.3. Like, I understand you want to maximize the probability of things happening. That's a big part of how I play things, but I think there's probably something too on a small slate, not handcuffing yourself with low upside guys just because you're playing their quarterback. So I think that, again, baseline Shakir is a great play with Josh Allen, but maybe you can't get back up there, or you don't want to have Khalil Shakir with every Josh Allen lineup. I think I'm like more likely to try to scale back on that second pass catcher than I am to force another one in, which I think is my larger point here.
I want to emphasize one thing you said, because I think it was very smart. You said low ceiling. That is the biggest thing against the Bills pass catchers, is their ceiling. I don't care about the floor. Like, their floor is low too, but the biggest issue is ceiling, because Shakir is fine on this slate, $6,400. But if you look at the games with all those guys active, he has the same deep target share and red zone target share as Ty Johnson, who is a running back. Can I emphasize that? So Khalil Shakir is like getting running back usage, and it's just the pass catching at $6,400. So I like him, and I'll make that clear, but the ceiling is definitely muted there. So I want to keep that in mind. So agree with you there. Keon Coleman, $4,900. Like if I want to make the Saquon plus Allen lineup work.
Man, you yelled at me for 1 catch, 6-yard line. He said 1 for 5.
No, I said 1 catch, 64 yards.
No, I said like 1 catch for, I think, 8 yards, and you yelled at me and said it'd be 64, but he's got 1 for 5 the last 2 games.
Oh, I don't care about that. In the 7 games with those guys active, 15% target share, 23% deep, 22% in the red zone. Like, he could do it. This 10 was that doesn't matter. That was with Trubisky and whoever the third string quarterback is for a bit, actually, too. Like, he did a 1 for 64. Nailed it. But like, if there's a guy who goes for 100 yards in the Bills, it's Coleman is most. No, I guess Shakir is technically most likely to do so. But like, Coleman's next up. So
Coleman's not that far off. I mean, he's averaging just 10 fewer yards per game in this split. And he does have, you mentioned the red zone share. He leads the team in that split. But if you look at the money targets, so whether he's inside the 10 or in the end zone when he's actually targeted, he's at 29%, which is easily a team high. Like, he makes sense from a touchdown probability standpoint, but it's such a conflicting conversation to have where if you're playing Josh Allen, you're expecting that he has a big game and therefore you're expecting that his team performs well. But there's kind of like I don't really know what the right phrase is, but it's like there are realities where Josh Allen has a solid to great game and no pass catcher really does much. And then you are kind of kicking yourself, like you're stubbing your toe by forcing in Keon Coleman, whose role is fine, but not phenomenal. So I think it's a really fascinating sort of conversation to have. I do agree with you where Coleman is the highest, like he's the highest ceiling option, but his odds of having a lineup killing week are also really high.
Yeah.
And I don't want to force that in too often.
FanDuel is not offering 100+ yards for Keon Coleman. If you want like the firm thing of, hey, Brandon's right about him having reduced upside. Shakir, so Coleman was 14-1 to get 90+. Shakir is plus 375. So like, also I've never bet that Shakir number. That's insane for the 90+. So yeah, whatever. But I think Coleman makes sense for 49. I don't want to get too high on him, but like
he has 2 100
I think it's
games this year.
Yeah, it's definitively for me Shakir 1, and then either Kincaid or Coleman number 2.
Coleman's 2 for me. I think Kincaid. There's just it's sort of like he just reminds me of like Tyler Higbee, like from years past, where it's like the building blocks are there, but the results aren't. I want to say that he's got yardage upside because he's athletic, but he hasn't shown it.
His snap rate has also been trending the wrong way.
I'm not convinced he's like 100% healthy, but again, there's a reality where look at how long it's been since he scored a touchdown. If you pull that back up, it's been a long time, and like that could change, and then he's in the perfect lineup. But process-wise, I don't think he's like a phenomenal play. I'd rather go with a slightly lower target share, but better downfield work, better red zone and money target shares with Coleman, and go somewhere else at tight end. With that potentially his opponent this week,
which is Travis Kelce. Let's talk about the Chiefs pass catchers, and we'll talk running backs after that. Travis Kelce's salary is $6,800. Came back to life last week. Eight targets, 117 yards. The Texans refused to cover him for some reason. I don't know. It was weird, but it's not a surprise at this point. Like we've seen this every year with Kelce in the playoffs. You look at the 3 games with Hollywood Brown active. Kelce has a 25% target share, 29% inside the red zone. I will say Xavier Worthy also has a 25% overall target share in that time with a 38% red zone share. It also gets red zone rushing work. So
and 41% of the money targets.
We have downplayed the Chiefs pass catchers this year.
Yeah.
Is it possible that we can now just say like, okay, cool, we feel good about Kelce and Worthy? Because that's where I am. It makes me very nervous, but I think that's where I'm at right now.
He's slowly gotten his way close enough to like that Rashee Rice role where there's like, oh no, this is the guy. No, he's not doing what Rashee Rice did. He's not getting that target share, but if you can get half the targets, I've been down on Mahomes. A lot of people are down on Mahomes, just fantasy production wise. That's what matters for this conversation. Not do I think he's going to run for 13 yards on, 3rd and 12 and pick up a first down. I think he's going to do that.
Yes, he will. There's
so
no
every
doubt
time
he will do that.
But you're getting half the targets in this 3-game sample with Hollywood Brown and Brown himself's at 17%. It's a pretty concentrated target share. You want to get different. You play Mahomes lineups, which I've been firmly against just due to like a lack of ceiling. But the question isn't, will Mahomes get you 30? That's the question whenever we have like Josh Allen and Lamar and a healthy like Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels in a good spot on a full slate. Right now you're saying, okay, what if like Hurts isn't super healthy? He doesn't do too much. He just kind of hands it off. He's fine. The Chiefs can keep Josh Allen in check, and the overall defense for Philly keeps Jaden Daniels in check. Like 18 or 19 for Mahomes is different. It's, logical. He can definitely do more than that. We're kind of waiting for a bigger eruption in like a big spot as they get pushed more. I know I'm like more likely than not. Like I'm probably not getting to Mahomes if I'm playing 10 lineups, just because I don't want to disperse things out too much. But Mahomes with those 2 pass catchers is, I think, really, like I say, really sharp. That sounds like a little too cocky.
No, I agree.
But like you're getting 50% of the targets for 2 guys who have pretty much the only upside or predictable upside in this offense. So you want to talk about getting different without being dumb. It's playing Patrick Mahomes with Worthy and Kelsey, and then you can play Saquon and figure it out from there.
And I think that this may sound counterintuitive, but let me explain it. I think that Mahomes is most appealing in single entry, because in single entry, you think about your opponent's mindset, where that's where FOMO, I think, sets in more than it does for multi-entry, where you're like, okay, I got one lineup in this contest. I got to get Saquon, got to get Josh Allen. You can get Saquon in there and then use Mahomes. So I think that like the appeal of Mahomes is highest in single entry because of that FOMO factor bumping up Josh Allen. I think that'll exist for like if you're not going Josh Allen, it's probably higher on Daniels than it is on Mahomes too. So I think you're playing single entry. I want to reiterate the thing we always say: you can play multiple different single entry lineups across different contests. It's a very important thing to emphasize. If you want your Josh Allen lineup, cool, do it. You can still get a different one. But if you're playing multiple single entry contests, I'd probably have one with Mahomes. If you're doing just multi-entry, like a 20 entry contest, something like that, I could see skipping over him there. I think that's fine. But for single entry, I think his appeal is really high, just because right now, there's no FOMO appeal with Mahomes. And that's kind of like where FOMO, if you're missing out, pops up most in single entry. So I think that's his best contest type is for single entry, because there's no FOMO factor with him at the moment.
And I think the natural sort of way to play single entry for a lot of people is, well, let me play like what my best lineup is, right?
Yeah, a cashy-ish lineup, like a correlated cash game lineup, basically, is what it tends to be.
But in a single entry, and I love these playoff slates because we can. Yeah, it's not easy to build a case for Mahomes process wise, but
no,
you're literally doing what I said. It's like there are ways that Hurts, Daniels, and Allen are either bad, more likely though that they're just kind of okay, don't erupt, and Mahomes actually is the QB1. In my simulations, he's around like 18% likely to be the highest scoring quarterback, which is probably higher.
Will his roster rate be above or below that number?
I
would take the under by a bit.
I would say roughly in line. It's just a 4 quarterback slate.
Yeah.
And I think
maybe because of Hurts injury, it winds up being higher. Yeah.
Yeah, and the lowest salary I think is slightly part of that, but again, it's like, you're asking yourself the question, and there are a lot of chances where Mahomes is good, especially with his increased rushing. And now it's a lot easier whenever he's got 2 guys who kind of have some juice. Maybe Kelsey's had the juice and just they haven't needed it.
Yeah, right.
Like, but you get 50% of his targets tied to 2 guys who can be difference makers. I think that really bumps up Mahomes for me. And then you look at the backfield here. It's not very appealing. Like backfield? It's. I said
I don't acknowledge these. I don't acknowledge these guys.
I said last week, like, okay, what if Kareem Hunt gets like 50 yards and a touchdown and like he can make the perfect lineup, and it's kind of what we got, but they have not, or they didn't at least last week, unveil Isaiah Pacheco to his old role. Like, you're basically just kind of banking on a touchdown or two going this way.
And Kareem Hunt is the guy who's got the short yardage stuff.
So, like, again, process-wise, you're kind of, I don't know, maybe someone like Kareem Hunt with a higher implied team total makes more sense than Austin Eckler. I don't really see it.
Yeah.
But I could understand the process of it because of his red zone role right now. But
I think Eckler could outscore Hunt without a touchdown. And that's why I'm just not going to use a single player in this backfield, I don't think.
Yeah, I understand.
Like, that might not be great process, but I don't care, frankly.
So again, it's like, I feel like I'm always doing this on these small slates, but process-wise, yeah, Hunt, Pacheco don't really make sense. There are also cases where Austin Eckler plays 39% of the snaps, doesn't really do a lot. Kareem Hunt scores, falls into the end zone once or twice, and like,
I don't care.
But that's kind of what you're looking at. Like, the snap rate's just not really there. First half, it was 42% last week for Hunt, 38% for Pacheco, 40% in the red zone for Hunt, 33% for Pacheco. So like, it's not even like Kareem Hunt's the clear goal line back, just getting all of the work. It's just kind of gross.
It was so frustrating too, because Pacheco played on both the first and second drive and then just never saw the field after that. Like, I was looking to bet his live player prop overs. I couldn't get a good enough price, so I skipped because I was like, okay, cool. They played him each of the first two drives. The second I saw him in the huddle on the second drive, I was like, cool, like, let's check this out. By the time that the props are back up, it was not a good enough number, so I didn't take it. But like, I wanted to because of that, and then he just didn't play basically the rest of the game, it seemed like. So I can't go to him at 55, can't go to Hunt at 6,000. Would rather get burned. I think that above both those guys for me is Marquise Brown at $5,800. Brown didn't do anything. I think he had no catches last week, correct? Yeah, correct. But he had a long target that went off his hands. In the 3 games he has played, his target share sits at 16.5%, but a 36% deep target share. He's over 4 on those deep balls. It's only 11 total attempts, but they could connect. So again, you want to be different without being dumb. I think Hollywood Brown does fit that. So even if I'm not forcing in Mahomes for multi-entry, I will as pass catchers. And I think that, frankly, all 3 of Worthy, Kelsey, and Brown have a lot of appeal in that order. But like, I don't want to discount Brown at 58 because I do think there is a good path to him having a solid game.
Yeah, as I'm scrolling through, because we have Worthy and Shakir at 65 and 64. And then it's a bump down to Hollywood Brown at 58. So you might catch some like higher than expected roster rates for those who have 6,200 left. And it's like, I got to play a receiver. I'll play Hollywood Brown. So that's part of it. But he is preferable for me to, I think, everybody in that range.
Right.
Pretty comfortably.
I think the better discussion is, where does he rank compared to flex plays in the 5,000 range?
That's
so let's go Kareem Hunt on down. It's Hunt, Goddard, Brown, Eckler, Nuke, Ertz, Pacheco, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think for me, Eckler is still my pretty clear number 1, and I'm going to go Hollywood Brown number 2 in that range. How about for you?
I may go Brown slightly above. Mostly because I don't like what I saw from Eckler's workload last week. I think I'm doing a lot of projecting that he is more involved, that they treat him like they did against the Eagles before.
You don't really need to, because like, he had 88 yards in scrimmage last week, 47 rushing, 41 receiving. Like, that's a good roll.
It is a better defense.
Yeah. He's at 61.8 yards from scrimmage per game. Like, if I got 61.8 yards out of, that's on average. If I got 61.8 out of Marquise Brown, I'd feel pretty good about that. He is plus 285 to get 60 plus yards on FanDuel. Hollywood Brown is. And let's see here. I want to look at Eckler's rushing plus receiving alt market over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Assuming it's posted, which it probably is because they're the best. Austin Eckler, alt rushing plus receiving, 60 plus is plus 175. I get the touchdown thing, but like, is Hollywood Brown getting the touchdowns on the Chiefs? Like that's the implied total angle. So I don't know.
Yeah, I understand it. I think Buffalo is a pretty solid matchup for downfield passing, though. They actually allow the highest catch rate on downfield passes of any team in football.
Okay.
Again, it's close. I'd probably, if I had to, go with Eckler more often than not. But I think Eckler and Brown just kind of do enough to stand out to me.
Yeah.
I might put Goddard third if he's full, just because I think his role is probably the best out of everyone else.
Yeah. I might go Keon Coleman above him at 49, but that's probably stupid. I don't know.
So we're going to run it back with Eckler then.
Yeah. One other way to be different is a Mahomes lineup with no Kelsey. And I think that is via having Worthy and Brown instead of Kelsey. I'm fine going all four, frankly. I don't mind that. But like, again, if you want to be different without being dumb, omitting Kelsey from a Mahomes lineup, you're not going to have people probably will not dupe you if you do that.
Yeah. Yep. And so the question going back to Saquon isn't, do you play him or not necessarily? It's, of course, I don't know. I'm still like roughly 8 to 9 out of 10 where I'd have Barkley, but there are ways even on this 4-team slate to differentiate in ways that aren't silly. Like, you don't want to play a backup quarterback and hope someone gets hurt, anything like that. You don't have to overthink it that much, even though there's only a few options. There are ways to differentiate. And I think that one actually makes a lot of sense. It's similar to, I would say other options, Hurts with Barkley, Josh Allen without any pass catchers.
Save this. I have to ask you a couple questions.
Okay.
First, any final thoughts for you on specifically Chiefs Bills?
No, I think it's another one where there's only so many options that make sense.
Okay. Second question is, who are your loves for this slate, regardless of position, considering salary, considering roster construction, etc.?
Josh Allen, Saquon Barkley, Xavier Worthy.
I agree with all three of those. And I think those would probably be the only three that I put as loves as well. So agreed on those. And now give me your 3 favorite ways to be different in a Saquon Barkley lineup.
Hurts with Barkley.
We're going through this, but yeah.
Okay. Hurts with Barkley.
Okay.
Probably a Mahomes stack with Barkley, just because that itself would be a little bit different.
Yep.
And maybe Barkley with AJ Brown in some form or fashion.
Sure.
That's a high salaried lineup where it's not going to be.
Yeah.
It's A, it doesn't make as much sense. B, it's not going to be super easy. See what that might look like.
I think that my Saquon preferred routes would be different with Saquon would be semi-heavy commanders, meaning Jaden Daniels with Terry McLaurin and probably Eckler. So 3 commanders in there. Number 2 for me would probably be the Mahomes one we talked about. Talking about Mahomes with some pass catchers.
And that's with Kelsey. I feel like if you don't necessarily have
Kelsey. Kelsey is like the baseline. Yeah, I think so too. And then number 3 is honestly Saquon, but leaving salary on the table because he has a high salary. We talked about leaving salary on the table if you don't use Saquon. I think if you do use him, leaving salary on the table is also in play for that setup as well. So couple different routes. I think I'd rank them in that order. The Commanders heavy, Chiefs heavy, and then leaving salary on the table are probably my 3 favorites, but I don't mind the Hurts one either. I think that makes sense too.
Yeah, there are, honestly, it's nice that all 4 quarterbacks are justifiable.
Totally.
on really any 2-game slate to some degree, all 4 quarterbacks are going to be somewhat justifiable just due to how things can go. But having 4 quarterbacks, even with a pretty gross running back slate, a couple, I don't want to say over-salaried pass catchers, but pass catchers at the top who don't have the best paths, like there are still ways to differentiate without being silly. You don't have to overthink it, but think about it. Yeah, I would say.
Yep. Put thought into it, but don't overthink it, I think is the way to phrase that there. Any final thoughts for you on the 2-game slate?
No, it's been a good year, but no more
fun.
thoughts on this slate, I think.
Our final 2-game slate of the year, but we will have a breakdown of Super Bowl 59 from a DFS perspective the Thursday before the game. That'll be at 10 a.m. Eastern on the YouTube page. So go there, turn on notifications. Still a lot of betting thoughts over there as well. Talk to Megan Payton again. We're going to have Aiden Cotter on tomorrow. It's a lot of good betting stuff over on the feed. Go subscribe there and turn on notifications to get notified as we go live. I'll have a breakdown of my models thoughts on Super Bowl 59 on Monday to break down that there. And again, check out the FanDuel Research Podcast feed for our PGA shows every Tuesday as well. Brandon, if people have questions for you on the socials, where can they find you there?
I'm on X at Gdula13, GDULA13, and on Blue Sky at Gdula.
I am on both X and Blue Sky at JimSannes. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your lineups for the final 2 games later of the year. We'll talk to you once again in 2 weeks to break down Super Bowl 59. This has been The Heat Check, a FanDuel Research podcast.